and welcome to the Rocha Revolution, my weekly Substack where I try to find important people all over the country to have this conversation. And my dear friend Jaime Harrison from South Carolina is nice enough to join us today. Thank you, Jaime, for being on.
Thank you, brother. It's so good to be with you. It's good to be on with everybody else who's joining as well.
And Jaime, you'll be proud to know that when I started this Substack, the original idea, and it stayed that way, is I wanted to have and make space for men in the Democratic Party to have a frank conversation. And so we've been having lots of those. We have actually, I think, only had one female guest. Not, we are very pro-woman over here, let me be clear, but
I know you are.
making space to kind of have the conversation about how the Democratic Party gets back in, what we've done to lose a lot of working class men. We've had a lot of those conversations. We've had a lot of great guests. But Jaime, I think that, folks know you. They know of you. They know of you as one thing, and that is the DNC chairman, that you've given up that seat just in the last cycle. But what they don't know is the Jaime that I know. I knew you very little as the DNC chairman. You were always my friend. You were always supportive as the chairman, let me be clear. But I knew Jaime way before then. And I think it's important for folks to know, and I'm remembering this, and I want to talk about this because I just got back on Monday from East Texas.
Yeah, I know you were home.
I went home for homecoming. I hadn't been home to a homecoming football game in 20 years. I took my wife to a high school Texas football game. Now, Jaime, Ebony is a fifth generation black woman from D.C. They didn't even have sports in her school. Now she went to a hippie high school here in D.C. that was focused on academics, which sounds boring as hell. They didn't have a football team. They didn't have a marching band. Now, they have some great football teams and marching bands in D.C. Let me be clear for all of you D.C. folks. But my wife went to a school in D.C. called Schools with No Walls. So they were really focused on academics. Well, Chuck Rocha went to the other kind of school where we focused on football. So when we got to the football field with all my buddies, she was like, "Oh, they have a band. This is amazing." And then she was like, "Ooh, they got cheerleaders just like the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders." Now, like, well, they're not exactly like that, but yes, we have cheerleaders. And it was homecoming, so she was fascinated with the mums that all the girls was wearing on their chest for the moms, the flowers, and then she got to see the homecoming court and then the drill team. She's like, "This is why football's so big. It's a party." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am. It is a Friday night shut down the city party."
Yeah, it's the culture. It's a culture, man.
Absolutely. But Jaime, what I want folks to know is I want you to tell the story. We both were raised by our grandmothers. I took Ebony by my grandmother's house where I was raised, and she got to see the trailer house that's still sitting there next door to my grandmother's, where my mama, who was 15, had two kids and was divorced and was raising us in that trailer house next to my grandmother. And I've told you this, and my grandmother came over and got me out of the crib when I was a baby, and she said, "You don't know nothing about raising no baby. He'll be over here with me." And so that's how it all started. But tell your story about how you grew up in South Carolina, because I think it's important before we start this conversation for folks to know where you came from.
Yeah. Well, Chuck, I think part of the reason why we like each other so much and we connected is because we were raised in very similar atmospheres. My mom was 16 when she had me. Dropped out of high school, and we stayed with my grandparents. And the story they always told me, my mom had me, but as soon as we came home from the hospital, I slept with my grandparents. Right. That is, before all of these rules about babies can't sleep in the beds, they need to be in cribs and no blankets and all that stuff. I slept in bed with my grandparents as a newborn baby because, again, my grandma didn't think my mom knew anything how to take care of babies. And so, as a result of that, I really created this symbiotic relationship between my grandparents and myself. My mom went on to leave South Carolina to go to Georgia. And when she went to Georgia, she left me in South Carolina with my grandparents because she was trying to find a job and get all that stuff. But Chuck, when she had gotten herself established, she said, "Well, Jaime, why don't you come to Georgia with me?" And I just couldn't go. And it's partly because my grandparents and I had built this relationship where I needed them, but they needed me too. Because I did well in school. I read when I was in middle school, I was reading at a high school level. So they would get bills into the house and I would read the bills to them. because my grandmother had an 8th grade education. My grandfather had a 4th grade education. So I would read the bills to them. Now I wouldn't always understand what they meant, but I could read it. And once I read it to them, they understood it and what they needed to do with it. But in middle school, Chuck, we were homeless for a little bit because my grandparents were defrauded out of their home. They had a house that I was born in, sold that house, and my grandma's whole thing was she saw these fancy trailers. You know how they started making them mobile homes, man, with the
Double
jacuzzis and
wise.
double wide. It was a double wide trailer, Chuck, and it had the fancy tub in it. You know, you can even get a little fireplace thing going and all kinds of stuff in it. Well, my grandma went and bought one of those places. She went to one of these trailer parks, met with a man. He told her, Miss Harrison, Mr. Harrison, every month you bring your payment to me. And my grandparents didn't have a bank account, but my grandfather would go to the post office and get a money order. He'd get paid, go to the post office, get a money order. The man said, "Bring your money order to me. I'll fill it out and send it into the company." They did that religiously, Chuck, for months, and then letters would come in the mail about uh, we haven't received your payment. We haven't received your payment. My grandma would call him up. I got this letter. My grandson just read to me. He said they haven't received the payment. He said, "Oh, there's something going on with their computer system. I'll call and straighten it out." Kept going on for a few more months. And there was one day, Chuck, again, I was probably in 6th grade. There was a knock at the door, and it was the sheriff. And the sheriff said, Miss Harrison, I'm sorry to tell you, but your home has been foreclosed on for lack of payment. And you have until this time to move out. That's the first time in my life I ever saw my grandfather cry. First time. And it was devastating, man. Shortly thereafter, my grandfather had lost his job. So we stayed, made little pallets on the floor, stayed on the couches of relatives. But it was those moments that really, really put in me that I needed to be able to stand up for people like my grandparents, that I needed to fight for folks like them. Because despite all of the hard work, all of the effort, all of the attempts to do the right thing, the world still never treated people like them right. And so that really is sort of the roots of who I am. It is the grandson of Willie and Jimmy Lou Harrison.
Well, I think that story says so much. Obviously, it moves and it moves a lot of us who hear that, and you don't want anybody ever have to live through what you lived through, and it's such a tragedy. But what we forget, not me and you, but lots of consultants and folks who run campaigns, is that folks deal with that every day still till today.
Every day, Chuck.
And so there's this anxiety out there, and Democrats don't really like when I talk about this, but I talk about how Donald Trump tapped into the anxiety in workers. They feel like your grandparents, like my grandparents, God rest their soul, about who's going to stand with us. And things have gotten so bad for people, regular working, lower middle class people, to where they were so desperate last few cycles to be like, well, at least he'll be the retribution, even though he was lying to them the whole time. Folks were hungry for something because there's this anxiety. And then you layer on other anxieties of just trying to make it on top of now Latinos with ICE in the street, or when you're trying to figure out how to pay for college. Like there's all these anxieties that have been going on for a while. My grandparents were both in World War II. They met there. My grandfather, who only had a 3rd grade education, had lied about his age to get into the shipyards to join the military. And then he would go on to go to Alaska, of all places. My grandfather taught me how to use tools and how to use things in the shop. And he was lucky enough, they had a little bit of land in East Texas. And he taught me a lot of lessons that today I'm reflected on when I'm working for candidates. Folks are like, well, how does a political consultant do what they do? And your job is to figure out how to convey a message to the voters. And when I reflect back, because we all know, and we talk about it here, I've never been to college, But I worked in that factory and had this grandfather who I followed around like he was my dad everywhere he went. I made every step. He taught me right and wrong. He taught me how to drive a tractor. He taught me how to be good to people. He taught me all the things. He taught me these things that aren't, I was raised a generation ago because I was raised by him. So when I sit down to write an ad, it looks and feels a little different because I don't have anything to go on what I read in a book, but I remember my grandfather's stories. I remember my grandmother cooking. I can still hear my grandmother tinging the coffee cup with a spoon when she's stirring her coffee in the morning. It's hitting the side of that ceramic cup, right? And think about the stories they tell. And when we were home this weekend, it all kind of came bubbling back up. That's why I'm so glad that you could join us because I was hanging around with a bunch of my buddies who I played football with, who are all Republicans. And y'all should know in East Texas, where I come from, it's very red. And it hadn't always been that way, but it's been red for 30 years now. And we had a great time. Me and these boys cut up, we grab assed, we played golf, we went and had dinner over at our buddy's house, and we did all the things. And wasn't no talk about them hating me because I was a Democrat. They know I'm a Democrat. They see me on TV. But we know all the 80% of things we have in common, and we rally around that when we're together. And I'd really like your thoughts about today. It seems like because of the internet, there's so many people making money out of pulling us apart or making us hate each other that it's destroyed politics in American culture where you got to be on one team or the other. And I'm supposed to hate you because you're black, or I'm supposed to hate you because you're a Democrat, or I'm supposed to hate you because you're white and a MAGA on both sides of that. Or do you feel the same way?
No, Chuck, I think you're right. You are spot on that the politics of division is profitable for a lot of folks, and they are making basically when they sow hate and they sow division, we are in essence paying for their second beach home or or their 2 week cruise vacation around the world. And when I often think back to Jim Clyburn's sort of a political father to me. And I remember as a young staffer on the Hill, and he used to tell me because he had a great working relationship with the Republicans in the delegation then. And he would say to me, he said, Jamie, even the way that politics should work is that even though we may take different roads and different paths, hopefully the destination is the same. Hopefully that we're trying to get to the same place, that we believe that this country should be good for all of the country's people. We may take a different direction to get there than the Republicans do, but hopefully we can find some common ground in terms of a common destination. I mean, things have changed that, sometimes I do think that the destinations are different. But I think part of what we have to do to get back to is instead of becoming caricatures of what a Democrat is or what a Republican is, that we peel back the layers a little bit and find that there's so much commonality that we have. Let's figure out those things that that commonality that we have and build on those things. And then after that, if we need to fight like hell on everything else, then let's do that. But let's figure out where we can all make progress on together. And up until that point where the progress can't be had and then we have to diverge, that's fine. When I was state party chair, one of my uh, closest political friends was my Republican counterpart, who was also the state party chair, Matt Moore. He and I, and we didn't start off as fast friends, but because the two of us were paired together to come and talk about the Democrats and the Republicans so often that we spent some time actually talking to each other and learning about each other. And we find out that we actually like each other. Again, we differ on politics. When I ran for the Senate, I was running for the Senate, but he was working for Lindsey Graham. But Matt was still my friend, regardless though that we were on different sides. And so um, we can find that, and we find it even in our own families. And so we got to figure out again how we can figure out the common ground that we have. Um, and then once we get past that, you can always have the healthy competition and the fight, but it doesn't have to get personal. It doesn't have to get vindictive, and it doesn't. It definitely doesn't have to be rooted in hate.
I think you're exactly right. And I think that leads to my next question, which is around what we've seen in American politics. There's one thing that's for sure, and there's a lot of blame to go around, but the Democratic Party has done worse and worse with working class voters, the old blue collar union voters. They still win a lot of that support, don't get me wrong,
Oh
but
yeah.
we bled that support. And folks come to me all the time as one of the only senior national Democratic operatives who didn't go to college, who still has calluses on my hands, who is connected to those workers because I was one of those workers. When I was home this weekend, I went over to the factory where I used to work and I took a video and I put it on my social media. You saw it of my old factory, my tire plant that was shut down. And across the street where I was standing was the old Union Hall. And it had a for sale sign in front of it because the retirees who had kept the Union Hall going, because there's a lot of retirees now, are now having to sell that land because they couldn't keep that going. It made me think about where we might have went astray or what we've done wrong. And I want to not talk about as much what we've done wrong, but how we get back to winning back these voters who at their core care about the democratic values and align with us when you talk to them and have that conversation that you're talking about. But because our brand is not branded as the working party anymore, I think we can get that brand back. But when folks come to me and say, Chuck, what and how do we get voters back that are you? I'm a non-college educated Latino teenage father, all the things that go along with the voters that we've lost. I'm the minority in my own party now because most folks who look and act like me are Republicans. And I think the way you do that is you get back to talking about family, faith, and work. But really, it ends with the third piece. No matter how much education you have, no matter how old or young you are, there's one thing that we all have to do at some level, and that's go to work. You may go to work in a bank. You may go to work in a field. You may go to work in a hospital. You may go to work in a school. But we got to work because what are we doing work for? Not because we love work. We're doing work because we have to provide for our families and whatever that is. That's the commonality of why I joined this party. I joined this party because the union told me the Democrats are with the workers and the Republicans are with the bosses. You're a worker. You're going to be a Democrat. And I was like, sounds right. And then it backed up with all the policy. While Republicans were trying to pass bills to do away with a 40-hour work week, we were fighting for getting double time on Sundays. That seemed like the worker possession. I think refocusing the party on work and then everything can deviate from work. Healthcare can, daycare can, where you stand on social issues, the environment, whatever your thing is, it can be there, and we have space for it in our party, but it starts with making a living for your family, whatever that thing is. And if you're retired like my mama, who's on disability, she gets $2,000 a month Social Security, and she lives off of that. That's her work. She got to make sure that's protected because she paid into Social Security for a long time. I think the way you start winning these men back, and I'll stop and get your position on this, is I think we have to recenter around the dignity and honor of work and how we make work better for people where they can make more money and have to pay less for their health care.
I agree with that. And Chuck, I'm going to say something a little controversial with some of our folks. We got to stop demonizing the work that people do,
Boom.
right? I mean, listen, I'm all for climate and all, but if you go to New Orleans and some of those guys are working with some of the energy companies and all that, but when they hear Democrats demonizing all of that, then in essence you're demonizing the work that you do. Or if you were at the Boeing plant here in Charleston, South Carolina, right? That plant where the men and women who are working there is making nice salaries, but also you got the port right there, and that port is a third of the jobs in South Carolina come to that port, and that means that the companies that are in the state have to be shipping things back and forth in order to do that. But but we have gotten so to the point where that you can only do the things that are like on this approved list that people want you to do. And if you do anything outside of it, it is demonized. It's bad. But you've got hardworking men and women who work hard each and every day to provide for their families. But when they hear that the party that they're going out to support is demonizing the work or the thing that they're doing, I mean, it makes people like, well, you don't support than me taking care of my family because this is the only job I got. This is the only thing I got. Some people don't have as many options with the world is there, is just filled with so many options that they can go and they can do A, B, C, D, and E. Some people don't have that. If they get a good job at one of these plants that actually pays a decent that is great. That is fantastic. That's the gold standard. I remember growing up, and I'm sure you probably remember this. Like it used to be like if you got a job at the post office, man, that was the height of good paying jobs with good government benefits and all of the like. And there's
Hmm.
certain jobs like if you got a job at the local GM plant, boom, that is the height of what people in your family want to do. But sometimes we, because of the issues of where we are in certain issues, we are so quick to demonize certain aspects of the world. And but average people are in those spaces, and we got to figure out, yes, we want companies to do better, yes, we want to fight on climate change, but we can do all of that without demonizing the people who are just trying to make ends meet, who are just trying to provide for their family, who are just trying to survive in a world that is not built for some of them to survive in, right? And again, we just got to get back to understanding that just our experience and the way that we see the world is not the only way that the people witness and see the world and experience the world. There are different perspectives, and we got to step in the shoes of other folks first before we start to these blanket condemnations about various things.
You couldn't be more right. And I see that bleed over a lot in the way that we come up with strategy around congressional races or Senate
Yep.
races or whatever that is, because you have a bunch of, again, I always say this phrase when I say well intentioned folks. Nobody is, these are good Democrats and they're good
Yeah.
consultants. They just have a different life experience. So when they're trying to figure out the party you're talking about, we do really well with college educated folks in the suburbs now at the Democratic Party, folks that make 100 grand a year, which I used to think was the richest people in the world, which I realize now ain't that rich, but they are making it. This is your point, Jamie, is that we don't mean to look down our nose at those people, but sometimes the way that we talk and message seems that way, to your point about, oh, you work over at the petroleum factory. That's dirty, nasty. You can't do that. When you're like, dude, that's how I pay my family. That's how I pay my bills. Like, I'm all with you for clean air and clean water, but I've got to work for a living. And we have lost that messaging. I think this is the key of winning back men and winning back working class men, is men think that this party is not for them, when we are literally the party that are fighting to keep families together, the party that's
Yeah.
fighting for you to make time and a half after 40, to make sure that you have a 5-day work week. Anything more than that, you get double time, triple time. You get a nighttime differential payment. I can talk about all that because when I negotiated union contracts, I was that guy on third shift, where I knew if I worked third shift, I'm making a little bit more money than the guy working on daylights because I'm having to work the graveyard shift. But that means when I write that ad to talk to a worker, it lands more. And I'm talking about shift differentials, and I'm talking about daycare, and I'm trying to figure out these things. This is where the cultural competency, when we use the word cultural competency, it ain't just Black culture. It ain't just Latino culture. There's a working class culture that cuts through all of that we don't talk about enough as the party. And I've been the lone voice on that for a long time with a few other folks that says, look, when we talk about these issues, there's hunger don't have a party or a skin color. If you're hungry or if you're homeless or whatever the thing, tragedy that may be happening in your life right now. But the one thing that people think of right now, these working class folks, is they're not sure the Democrats are with them because they sound a little snooty and a little preachy. And
Yep.
Republicans, they're not sure if they're with them because they're literally making things more expensive, and they're a little crazy. And I don't like these cops in the street. And I don't like how they're treating children in apartment complexes in Chicago with ICE agents. So I think this is the opening in the midterm elections for us to say, no, 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 no. We're going to be the party of common sense. They tried to sell you common sense, which is just bullshit. They could give two shits about you. The only family they care about is their family, and Donald Trump has proven that. It's time to redirect what we're doing around the American family as a whole. I think that's how we pull ourselves out of this kind of deficit that we're in with the party.
No, Chuck, you are in. We are in total agreement on that. This is an opportunity for us to reclaim a connection with working people in this country, because they see the alternative on the other side. But we, again, cannot be on our high horses. We cannot be preachy. We cannot be holier than thou. We got to take people where they are, dealing with the issues that they're dealing with, and first of all, just listen. We don't always have all of the solutions to every problem. And sometimes, and most, not sometimes, most of the time, the people who are facing the problems also know the solution to the problems. They just don't have the power to enact those solutions in order to address the problem. But we as a party do have some power, at least some right now, even in the minority. And so we gotta go to where people are. We got to listen to them. We got to figure out what they believe is the recipe for addressing some of the difficulties that they have. And then we use our mechanism, not the party, as a vehicle in order to get to those solutions. And then we let people know what we did, right? We let them know that you asked for this, you wanted me to do this. This is what we have done. We achieved that goal. Now, what's next? What's next on your list that we need to check off, right? Um, we got to get back to that, and people have to be able to rely on us. And we can't, Chuck. It just cannot be just TV ads and all this other stuff. We got to get back to helping people. And when we do that, I think we rebuild the trust. And when that trust is rebuilt, then people won't see it as a pox on both houses, right? I'm just going to sit out, because now they see the tangible results of, well, when I vote for these people, this has happened for me. This is how this has improved my life, the life of my family, improved the quality of the community that I live in.
I think you're right, not only have you been a party chairman at the state and national level, but you've been a candidate for a federal office when you ran for the U.S. Senate in South Carolina. My next question is about there is this. It seems like through the anxiety of what I've spoken about, you see a new kind of candidate emerging. You see a Bob Brooks in Allentown, who is a local fireman and Teamster president. You see Graham Plattner running in Maine. You see Bobby Polito, a country music singer in McAllen, Texas. You see lots of regular folks. And I'm not saying if we talk about him, if we support him, there's primaries in lots of these places. I'm just talking about these kinds of different. It's not the regular candidates that we're used to seeing, right? I want to know what you think that effect is having and on the party of having and some of the things you've seen done right and wrong in some of these races. But it seems like Democrats, and this is Chuck Rocha speaking, not Jaime, that we figured out we got a problem with working class men. And so what we started doing is recruiting like these stereotypical, and I don't mean they're not these kind of people, they are an oyster farmer, a firefighter, a construction worker, a country music singer to be our candidates, thinking that's going to fix our problem.
Which it isn't. I mean, what we got to do, Chuck, is you need the best candidate that reflects the people in those communities, right? Who can connect with the folks in those communities. And we got to stop thinking about it as like we're trying to put together a puzzle and we need to find that right piece that fits right in, right in that group. No, what we need to do is figure out and allow people to figure out what's best for them. Who do they think is best equipped to fight for them? It is not always, yes, you can go out and look for certain things. That's fine if you think, but I'm a much more, let the thing go organically. But now that doesn't mean that sometimes organically nothing comes up, and then the party has to prime the pump to get something to come out, right? Um, but it's great to see this diversity of folks. But I also, one of the things that has bothered me right now is also the sort of uh, and I see it, and I want to say it in the most respectful manner, but it's sort of in like the white male savior complex that we sometimes generate in this party with some of our candidates juxtaposed to candidates of color, right? That who's this next shiny new object? Like almost who's the next boy band, right? That's going to be out there, but at the same time, you have New Edition that is just as good, if not better, right? But you know what I mean? Like we'll find Backstreet or NSYNC and this and that. Yeah, they're good, they're talented, it sounds good, but the whole package is right there. But no, we think this is the package that we need, and that bothers me sometimes. And I've been calling it out a little more because I think we just got to be careful, particularly when you go back to those communities and tends to be the community of color to be the backbone and to always, they're performing at, the Latino community 50, 60, 70% turning out for Democrats, Black community 80, 90%. But then when our candidates from those communities step up, we don't, no, that's probably not the right candidate, and we can't give them support. And so it just can't. It has to be both. It has to go both ways. It can't just be a one direction.
I will be here and be the first to say that your knowledge of 1990s and 2000 boy bands is disturbing, just so you know. That bothers me a lot. Just so we're all clear there. Look, as a candidate, can you give other folks that are listening, now that you've been a candidate, you've seen the party running, you see all the things that we do right, and you see the things that we do wrong. Tell me some of the advice you would have for candidates out there that are running at this particular time in the world. Donald Trump is the president. You have folks that are reacting to that. You have a government that is shut down. You have a party that is not popular within its own ranks because our base is so rapid to see somebody fight back that they're giving us low ratings because they literally want more fighting. And then you have a Republican Party that's literally kowtowing, if I'm using that the right way, to an emperor or king. Speaking of, there's no King's protest this Saturday. Everybody should go out and participate in the No King's protest.
Yes.
Your unique vision into this about what you would say to folks and give their advice to candidates running right now at this time in American history.
Well, I think you have to be your authentic self. And you can't just, I see this many times with first time candidates, but also particularly with candidates of color, in that, they've never run statewide before, they've never run for office before, though they are extremely successful. They have really broken through. They've done all of these things, but then they sort of retreat back. All of the things and the natural instincts that they've had to succeed and to break through and to break all of the stereotypes and all these other things. They suppress those things, that natural feeling and ability, and just listen to what consultants say that they need to do. And many times, as you know, and you've been in these consultants calls, they have a cookie cutter approach. This is the way that you need to do running a U.S. Senate race. This is the way you need to run a House race. Well, that doesn't always fit every candidate. And what candidates need to understand is you got to be you, because that person is why you're at this place right now. And you cannot bury your natural instincts. You can't bury your natural gut inclinations about what you need to do and what you need to see. And you need to be your authentic self. You need to be your true self. And you need to let that shine through the campaign. Because again, that is what has brought you to this moment where you are a candidate running for office. So that is not to say you don't listen to your consultants, yes, but they're only going to give you advice. But ultimately, you have to pick that advice that is best for you and let that be reflective of the campaign that you run. So don't turn off your natural instincts that you have in your head about what's right, what's not right, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And because I think ultimately what people want right now, they want people who are authentic, who are real. That doesn't mean they're going to agree with them on every single policy issue, but what it means is that it means that they just want real people that, in the end of the day, that they trust, who they believe will fight for them and their families and their communities. And I think if we can just be our real selves, we'll be in a much better situation.
There's a lot of different consultants that get to work on independent expenditures like me and our team. We do very little candidate work because there's a small group of a small group of in the know consultants who get all that work. If you're a Senate consultant, you get to be a Senate consultant. If you're a House consultant, you get to be a House consultant, and you get to work next to the candidate. Now, what that means by that is, and why that's so important, is because consultants that get to build a personal relationship with a candidate holds the power in the meeting of having that personal relationship with a Jaime Harrison, having a personal relationship with whoever that congressman or presidential candidate is. So they keep that to a really small group of people who do that over and over again. To Jamie's point, they're the ones who are always saying, this is the way it's run. I've done this with 30 years over this many people, and I promise you, you got to do it this way. And normally, what that means for all of you nerds at home listening, because I know my audience is a bunch of election nerds, is you end up putting bubble wrap around every candidate saying you got to do this. You become very cautious. You get over legalese. You get way too lawyered up when you have somebody like a Donald Trump. And again, it drives Democrats crazy when I give him credit, and I don't give him full credit, but he will speak crazy shit. And people, I won't say they like it, but it just sounds so different than our orchestrated talking points that have been legalese down to make sure that they're cautious and all the things, to where folks were so desperate, to Jamie's point, for something authentic that they thought that guy that was a carnival barker and lying to them was the savior. And it's just, and now it's coming home. Folks are aggravated because their stuff is going up. Everything in their life is going up. These tariffs are making it almost unlivable with coffee and beer and steak and things that people eat every day. To where the more off, that's why people like a Graham Plattner, whether he makes it or not, whether he's your candidate or not. He sounded like a regular guy when he did a launch video.
Yeah,
People thought he was the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I was like, he's just speaking regular shit. He ain't that great. He could be wonderful. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Folks liked Bernie Sanders because he said the same shit over, whether you loved him or hated him. He said the same thing over and over. People are like, oh, that seems pretty authentic. He ain't lying about it. I'm not sure if I'm down with this particular thing, but they liked it. So this is a great lesson for all of you listening, is this is why we went down a certain road over a longer period of time, because you've had this same group of small clutch consultants who were only working with the House and Senate candidates who said, you must do things this way. We should break away from that. Not saying that all their ideas are bad. I'm just saying that you do that and you run the same campaign in a box. You start bringing that policy book to a boxing match, and you're going to get your ass whooped every time. Am I missing something?
No, you are spot on. It is every time. And I often tell folks, because we are academic, we have a party of a lot of academics. We got a party of a lot of policy wonks. And many of them go to DC because they want to enact policy. They
want to help people with it.
They want to help people with it. That's exactly right. But that doesn't always translate to the politics, right? Right.
That part.
And that's the big disconnect, because Chuck, you and I both know people don't want a 20-page policy paper. They don't read a 20-page policy paper to determine who they're going to vote for. They determine off of two things. It is the heart and the gut, whether or not they feel like you are speaking to who they truly are, and there's some kind of emotional connection there. And so if you are always just speaking to the head and you're not speaking to the heart and the gut, then you're not connecting with folks. And part of what the Republicans have always understood is that emotion drives people, right? It drives people and it makes them make decisions. Now, the emotion of the day for them, the emotion of choice for them, is always fear. They want to make you afraid of every damn thing, every single thing they want to make you afraid of. And that is what they use in order to drive you to the polls to support them or to oppose Democrats. Maybe we need to use a little fear sometimes, but I think ours is more of it's that hopeful thought, but we will policy it to death. We will, use talking points to death, that by the time you get whatever the message from us, it ain't inspiring you to do anything, but to stay home. And so we just have to figure it out. And again, we need to make sure that our candidates are authentic and that they're speaking to the heart and the gut, and that we don't weigh them down with all of these. Not to say that policy is not important, but they got to find the emotional connection.
As we get down to the end of it, I want to respect your time. I want to talk a little bit about your new podcast, at your table. You've been at our table, not your table, at our table. You tell us what your thinking was behind that and what you're doing with your guests with your new venture.
Well, and you are one of my upcoming guests, and I'm looking forward. It's a really great conversation. Black men, Latino men having a conversation about our role in our space in the party. And so I'm looking forward for that episode to come out. But really, at our table is to have conversations like we're having right now, Chuck, just like family conversations where we're just being real about the party, about what's going on in the world, and not to sugarcoat it, not to bury it under a lot of poll tested analysis and just being real about where we are. The whole concept of at our table is, again, it's rooted in my experience with my grandparents. At our table, at our dinner table, that dinner on Sunday, we would have some of the most impactful, hardest, frank conversations. And that was just a really important moment for me. And I always look forward to the Sunday dinner and being at the table where we're all there, we're all talking about what's going on and what's going on in our lives, and shooting straight, right? Just going forward. Now there are moments. Part of at our table in the podcast, I do the "Sit Your Ass Down" award, and it's because sometimes my grandfather would say that at the table when you got a little too big for your britches. But I really felt that we needed to get past. You get the 2-3 minute. You're on TV a lot. You go on the national TV and you have a conversation, and you get 3 minutes to try to make a point. Well, you can't make a point sometimes in 3 minutes. You need to be able to give some color. You need to tell a story. You need to give background and anchor it, right, so that it has some emotion. And so this is a long form way to have that conversation, so that we're not just caricatures of what Democrats are or what the Republicans frame us as, but people can see the real, authentic people.
Last is the lightning round. I like to end with food and music. Talking about my grandparents, talking about your grandparents, I need to know the meal that your grandmama would make that you always look forward to the most.
Well, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners were my favorite. So
would it
that
be
is
old
because,
school turkey and dressing, or what would it
oh
be?
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, it is turkey and dressing. And my grandma would stay up because we didn't have the big ovens like you got now, right, in houses. That little oven with the four eyes on, stove with the four eyes on it. And my grandma would stay up the night before all night to cook. And this is how I learned to cook, because I would stay up all night with her. And it would be turkey and stuffing and gravy, giblet gravy, and rice and perlo rice and green beans and sweet peas and collard greens. And she'd have cabbage also, and then there'd be all kinds of desserts. You have pound cake and lemon meringue pie and sweet potato pie and coconut pie, red velvet cake, and I mean all of the stuff. And she made all this with one oven, right? One oven, and four eyes on the stove, and she's making all of this stuff, and that was always my favorite time. And then when she made her fruit cake. Now my grandma's fruit cake, Chuck, she would get one of these big wash tubs to make and
Mm-hmm.
bake the fruit cake in, and then she would douse it with all these bottles of red wine. Uh, and then the wine would penetrate the thing, and then she wrap it up, and then she put it in the closet for for a week or two.
Wow.
I mean, and then when you cut that thing, it'd be so moist, and she would have so many nuts in it. Not only it's the fruit, but it's like the nuts. I mean, every type of nut you can think of, she would put in this thing. And I'm gonna miss that, man. I miss her, but I'm gonna miss that, and always good feelings when I think.
My grandmother would cook like that too, and my mama would make some of the stuff, and my aunts. And I remember my grandmother's thing is they used to smoke a turkey, but her number one meal for me was, and folks who are old like me and you will know, is that my grandmother made fried chicken in an iron skillet with Crisco,
Yeah.
and we would have French fries that she made from potatoes that she cut up by hand. So her fried chicken and those French fries are something that still sit with me today, and there'll never be anything I'll ever put in my mouth that's better than that. The two music questions were: what was your grandparents listening to getting ready for Christmas? What was their go-to music for them? And then B, what is your favorite motivation song? I like to ask folks, what would be your walk-up song in a baseball game?
No. Well, Temptations' Silent Night is I
Grandparents.
mean, that was my grandparents, and it's one of mine too. I also love right now Charlie Brown Christmas is what my kids and I, and we start in November. And we start listening to Christmas music in November in my house.
Nice.
But Temptations' Silent Night is just, I mean, you can't beat that. And then in terms of I'm
Walk
a
up
big Mike
songs.
walk up song. I'm a big Jackson fan. Like Michael Jackson is, the GOAT in my mind. And Can You Feel It?
Mm,
Uh, is
nice.
that is my walk up song.
Well, I appreciate you. Everybody knows here my eclectic sound goes from my mama listening to old Commodore songs back in the 70s when they had the big fros to listening to Bob Seger and Linda Ronstadt in the 80s and 70s to classic rock to classic country from George Strait to all the way down to Merle Haggard. But I need y'all to check out at our table, at your table.
At Our Table, aotpodcast.com. Or you can go to YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, folks.
Make sure you go there and you subscribe. Also, thanks again for listening to the Rocha Revolution Day. If you're subscribed, thank you so much. Share with your friends and family. I want to thank my brother Jaime for having such a frank conversation and always being a dear friend. And at the end of the day, you can always count on us Trailer Park Kids to come and get you. Don't you worry about it. Y'all be good.
Thank you, Chuck.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody.